It was late at night on the 42nd floor of Jackson Tech Tower in San Francisco, where the city lights glowed faintly through the tall windows. Avery Jackson, disguised as Emma, the cleaner, moved her mop across the polished hallway floor with care. She wore a plain gray uniform, her name tag pinned crookedly to her chest. Suddenly, Todd Bennett, the operations manager, stepped into view. His white shirt was crisp, but his face carried a hard scowl. "Don't you ever talk back to me, Emma," he snapped, his voice sharp and cold, cutting through the quiet. The air grew heavy with tension, thick with the unfairness of his tone. Avery looked up, her hands steady on the mop. "Sir, the floor's clean." "I've gone over it twice already," she said softly, trying to keep the peace. Todd didn't reply. Instead, he grabbed a cup of water from a nearby table and poured it over her head. The cold liquid splashed down her face, soaked her curly hair, and drenched her uniform. It pooled on the floor she'd just scrubbed spotless. She gasped, the chill shocking her body. But it was the meanness of it, the pure spite, that took her breath away. No one should be treated this way, she thought, her heart sinking. Todd stood back, a smirk twisting his lips. "Now you've got something real to clean up," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. He turned and walked off, his polished shoes clicking on the wet floor, leaving Avery alone in the mess. She stood there, water dripping from her chin, her uniform clinging to her skin. The shame burned. The next night, the 42nd floor of Jackson Tech Tower shone under bright fluorescent lights. Avery, still posing as Emma, guided her mop across the floor with quiet focus. Her name tag said Emma, not Avery Jackson, hiding who she really was. Her hands, once smooth from signing million-dollar deals, were now red and rough from harsh cleaning solutions. She wasn't here by accident. She had a purpose. This wasn't just a job, it was a mission to uncover the truth about the company her father had built. Every swipe of the mop brought her closer to understanding what went wrong behind the polished walls. As she worked, Todd Bennett approached again, his expensive leather shoes tapping loudly. He clutched a stack of reports, his face set in a familiar frown. In board meetings, he'd never bothered to look her in the eye, but now he loomed over her, barking orders like she was nothing. "Pick those up," he snapped, dropping wet papers at her feet. Avery's blood boiled, but she bent down silently, playing her part. She wanted to stand up, tell him she was Avery Jackson, and fire him right there, but that wasn't the plan, not yet. She needed to see more, to know how deep the rot went. At 28, Avery was no ordinary woman. A UC Berkeley graduate with a brilliant mind, she'd earned a spot on Forbes 30 Under 30 for her ideas in green technology. Jackson Tech Solutions wasn't just any company. It was her father James's dream, started 35 years ago in his garage with $2,000 borrowed from his grandmother. Now it stood as a $6 billion fintech giant in Silicon Valley, a rare triumph for a black CEO. James had broken barriers to build it, and Avery had grown up knowing its value. But something had changed, and she was here to find out what. James Jackson, now 60, was the heart of Jackson Tech Solutions. He'd built it on two simple ideas: innovation and treating people right. His silver hair and warm smile showed a life of hard work and pride. But 6 months ago, a heart attack hit him hard, a warning he couldn't ignore. Doctors told him to cut the stress. No more 80-hour weeks. Succession wasn't just a future plan anymore, it was urgent. Avery, his only child, had been trained to lead since her college days. She was smart and ready, but James worried she didn't know the whole story of the company he loved. One evening at his Pacific Heights estate, James sat across from Avery at the dinner table. The city lights sparkled below through glass walls. "Avery, I'm proud of your smarts," he said, his deep voice steady and kind. "You've done so much already, but you don't know the real company, the workers' side. Those reports you read, they don't tell you how people are treated down there." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I've heard things, whispers, that we're not the place I meant us to be. That bothers me, and I need you to see it for yourself." Avery set her fork down, listening closely. She hadn't expected this. James leaned forward. "I started as the janitor, the salesman. Every job there was," he said. "That taught me what really matters. People hide the truth from the boss, even from me. You can't lead what you don't understand, Avery. I've heard the company's lost its way, lost the fairness I built it on. No one will tell you straight, not as my daughter." His words carried weight, a challenge she couldn't ignore. She nodded slowly. "What do you want me to do, Dad?" she asked, ready to step up. That night, over coffee in James's quiet dining room, they made a plan. Avery would go undercover as a cleaner for 2 weeks. No special treatment, no easy outs, just honest work. She traded her sharp suits for faded clothes from a thrift store. Her sleek hair went back to its natural curls, tucked under a simple scarf. She swapped her designer glasses for plain ones and took off her polished nails. By morning, the polished executive was gone, replaced by Emma, a woman no one would notice. It was a bold step, but Avery never backed down from a challenge, especially one about fairness. James handled the details with care. He set her up with Bay Area maintenance services, a cleaning contractor, so no one in HR would suspect a thing. Her fake ID as Emma was solid. Background checks, paperwork, all discreetly arranged. She'd work the night shift on the 42nd floor, where the company's top brass roamed by day. This was her chance to see if Jackson Tech still lived up to the decency James had built it on 35 years ago. Avery knew the stakes. 2 weeks to learn the truth about the company she'd soon lead. She took a deep breath, ready to start. Her first shift began at 10 p.m., long after the executives had gone home. The supervisor, a tired man with a clipboard, rushed through the rules. Cleaning steps, safety, warnings, no stealing or you're out. He barely glanced at her, handing over keys and a checklist. As Emma, Avery was invisible. Workers stepped around her cart without a word. Some bumped it and kept going. She'd always commanded respect before, but now she was a shadow. By the end of that first night, her hands ached with new calluses. She saw it already. Some treated the cleaners like they didn't matter at all. By her second day, Avery got used to the job's grind. Her muscles stopped screaming, and her hands grew tougher. She learned to mop with less strain, saving her strength. But nothing could brace her for Todd Bennett's harshness. At 45, he ran his team like a dictator, caring more about results than people. His pressed shirts and stern face hid a mean streak she hadn't seen from the boardroom. Down here, he didn't hide it. She watched him closely, noting every word and move. This wasn't the company her father had dreamed of. It was something colder, and she needed to know why. Todd came by during a shift, inspecting her work with a sneer. "This is a disgrace," he said, pointing to a faint smudge above a vent, a spot no one cleaned nightly. "Do it right, or don't bother." He ordered her whole team to redo the 3rd floor, keeping them 2 hours late with no extra pay. Sophia, another cleaner, spoke up. "Sir, that's for quarterly cleaning, not every night." Todd cut her off sharp. "I don't want excuses, just do it." Avery saw the unfairness plain as day. He didn't care who he hurt, as long as he looked in charge. Todd seemed to pick on Avery most of all. Maybe her quiet strength, hard to hide completely, rubbed him wrong. He found fault in everything she did. Windows had streaks only he could see. Carpets needed vacuuming twice. Her cart wasn't neat enough. "Are you even trying?" he'd snap, loud enough for others to hear. She kept her head down, saying, "Yes, sir," though every word stung. As Avery Jackson, she could have ended him with one call. As Emma, she had to take it. But each insult built her case, showing her the truth James feared. The company had lost its heart. One Thursday night, Avery cleaned a hallway alone. Her cart lined up neatly against the wall. The floor gleamed at 11:30 p.m., most offices dark and empty. She heard Todd's shoes clicking closer. He stopped by her cart, eyeing her work with a fake frown. Then, without a word, he swung his arm and knocked the cart over. Bottles and rags spilled across the floor with a loud crash. He stepped through the mess, his shoes leaving prints on her clean marble. He didn't look back, just walked off with a smug little grin, like it was nothing. It was a deliberate act of spite. Avery stood frozen, staring at the wreck. Her pulse raced, not from the mess, but from what it meant. This wasn't just bad manners. It was power twisted into cruelty with no worry about consequences. She knelt to pick up the supplies, her hands shaking a little. Tears pricked her eyes, but she fought them back. This was about more than her now. She thought of her father, starting as a janitor, building something good. These workers deserved better. People like him once did. She wiped the floor again, promising herself she'd make it right, no matter what it took. A few days later, Todd came back, his mood darker. "Think you're smart, huh?" he hissed, stepping close as she mopped. She stayed quiet, focusing on her work. He planted his foot on her clean floor, smearing dirt, then grabbed a cup of water and dumped it over her head again. The cold soaked her through, dripping onto the tiles. "Now fix it," he said, his voice calm but nasty, tossing the cup down beside her. Avery's chest tightened with rage. The unfairness wasn't just personal, it was a slap to everything her father stood for. She'd had enough. Ryan Carter, the 42-year-old marketing director, looked every bit the part. Stylish glasses, tailored suits, a confident air. One night, Avery cleaned his office on the 42nd floor, expecting a simple task. She started at 10 p.m., figuring 20 minutes would do it, but Ryan was still there, typing away, and he turned to watch her. "This place is a mess," he said, though it looked fine to her trained eye. "Just a few cups and papers." His tone wasn't helpful. It was picky, like he enjoyed finding fault. She nodded and got to work, sensing this wouldn't be quick or easy. "You're doing it wrong," Ryan said as she wiped the glass table standing over her. "Use circles, not lines. Look at those streaks." She redid it, though it was spotless. Hours later, he inspected again, pointing out flaws no one else could see. Lint on the carpet, a smudge on a shelf. "Start over," he ordered, smirking as she obeyed. Avery's arms ached, but she kept going, exhausted. It wasn't about clean, it was a game to him, a way to feel big by wearing her down. She saw the cruelty clear as day, another crack in her father's dream. Ryan's habits didn't stop there. She learned he did this often, leaving coffee cups teetering on trash bins to spill when she emptied them, scattering clips on fresh vacuumed rugs, then complaining about her sloppy work. "Can't you do anything right?" he'd say, loud enough for others to hear. Avery watched him, adding every petty act to her mental list. He enjoyed the control, the power over someone he thought was beneath him. It wasn't right, not for a company built on fairness. Each time he smirked, her resolve grew. She'd make sure he faced the consequences of betraying Jackson Tech's values. After Todd's second water attack, Avery decided to test the system. If Jackson Tech cared about dignity, HR should step in. Lisa Harper, the HR director in her mid-40s, seemed approachable. Her office had a safe space sign, a warm smile on her posters. Avery went to her during a lunch break, still in her Emma uniform. She sat across from Lisa, who offered coffee and a friendly nod. "I need to tell you about something," Avery said plainly, then described Todd's actions. The water, the humiliation, all of it. Lisa listened, her head tilted, looking like she cared. "We take this seriously," Lisa started, her voice smooth. "Thanks for coming to me." But then her tone shifted. "You're just a cleaner, Emma. You've got to know your place here. Todd's strict about standards." "Don't take it personally." The words hit Avery like a slap. Lisa's smile stayed, softening the brush off, but the message was clear. Workers like Emma didn't count. "Focus on doing better," Lisa added, as if that fixed it. Avery nodded, thanked her, and left. The safe space sign mocked her as she walked out, proof the system didn't protect the powerless. Back in the hallway, Avery replayed Lisa's words, stunned. She'd recorded the whole talk on her phone, hidden in her pocket. Every dismissive syllable caught. It wasn't just Todd now. HR was part of the problem, shielding the bullies instead of the workers. Michelle Vaughn, 45, was a sales VP and a company legend. Tough, successful, a force in every room. One Friday, Avery cleaned the 38th floor conference room at 9 p.m., her scheduled time. Michelle was there with her team, papers spread out. "How dare you interrupt," she snapped, her sharp voice cutting through the air. Avery paused, mop in hand. The room wasn't hers to barge into, but this was her job. Michelle's glare said otherwise. She saw Emma as a nuisance, not a worker doing her part. The tension rose fast, and Avery braced herself for what might come next. "I'll come back later, ma'am," Avery said calmly, stepping back to avoid a fight. Michelle didn't let it go. She stood, closing the gap. "Do I have to teach you courtesy, someone who scrubs floors?" she yelled, loud enough for the hall to hear. Then, without warning, her hand swung out, slapping Avery's cheek hard. The crack echoed, stinging her face. "You're nothing here," Michelle hissed, her eyes cold. Avery stumbled against her cart, the pain sharp but the shock sharper. No one should hit another person like that. Not here, not anywhere. The room went silent. Michelle's team stared at their papers, avoiding Avery's eyes. No one spoke up, no one helped, just quiet cowardice. Her cheek burned, a red mark rising, but the real hurt was deeper. She nearly broke, wanting to shout, "I am Avery Jackson," and end it. But she held back, swallowing the urge with iron will. This was the breaking point. Proof Jackson Tech had lost its soul. She mumbled an apology and started cleaning, her mind racing. The slap wasn't just personal, it was a sign of rot she'd fix. She'd make them all answer for this. After 2 weeks, Avery had seen enough. Cruelty piled on cruelty. She turned her cleaning cart into a tool for justice, hiding a small camera and recorder among the rags and bottles. Night after night, she worked quietly, capturing Todd's harsh words, Ryan's petty games, and Michelle's slap on tape. She snapped photos of papers left out, her phone silent in her pocket. No one noticed Emma listening, watching. Every clip and picture built her case, showing a company gone wrong. She wasn't just angry for herself now. She was fighting for every worker, treated like they didn't matter. The evidence was her weapon. Digging deeper, Avery found worse. Todd, Ryan, and Michelle weren't just mean. They were crooked. She caught whispers on her recorder. They were skimming funds meant for workers' raises, pocketing thousands. Papers she photographed showed they'd leaked company secrets to rivals, hoping to push James out before Avery took over. The proof was airtight. Dates, times, their own voices plotting. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was betrayal of everything Jackson Tech stood for. She held the truth in her hands, a stack of recordings and images that could tear down their lies. Now, she had to decide how to use it right. Avery sat alone one night, thinking hard. She could take this to James quietly, stop the thieves, and be done. But that might miss the bigger problem, the rot in the company's heart. Going public could shake things up, but it risked hurting good workers caught in the fallout. She wanted fairness, not chaos. The right way was bold but just, and she'd need James's help to pull it off. This wasn't about revenge, it was about fixing what was broken, making sure no one else faced what she had. With a steady breath, she chose her path, a reckoning that would clean house for good. Friday night after her shift, Avery slipped into a restroom blocks from Jackson Tech Tower. She shed Emma, the scarf came off, her curls fell free, and she put on her sharp glasses. In a blazer, she rode to James's Pacific Heights estate, the city lights stretching below. James met her at the door, his face lined with worry. "You look worn out," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I am," she admitted, "but it's more than tired. It's what I've found." She carried a laptop full of proof, ready to show him the ugly truth she'd lived for 2 weeks. For hours, they sat in his office, the evidence unfolding. Avery played the recordings. Todd's water splashing, Ryan's taunts, Michelle's slap ringing out. She showed stolen funds and leaked plans. James's face darkened with every clip. When he saw Todd pour water on her, his jaw clenched tight. Michelle's slap made his fists ball up. "They've betrayed us," he said, his voice low but shaking with anger. "Everything I built, everything I believed in." He looked at Avery, pride mixing with his fury. "You've done what I couldn't," he added. She nodded, knowing this hurt him as much as it drove her. They planned late into the night. James would call an emergency board meeting Monday morning, citing urgent issues. Todd, Ryan, Lisa, Michelle, and Ethan Brooks, a schemer in on the theft, would all be there, clueless. The board would get a heads up about trouble, but not Avery's role. She'd stay Emma until the moment was right, cleaning the boardroom to watch them squirm. It meant one more day of taking their garbage, but it'd be worth it. Justice had to be seen, not just done. As she left, James hugged her tight. "This is your company now," he said, trusting her completely. Monday morning, sunlight hit the Jackson Tech Tower as Avery arrived in her Emma uniform. She pushed her cart to the 42nd floor boardroom, dusting the walnut table before the 10A meeting. Todd stormed in, briefcase in hand. "What are you doing here?" he barked. "This has to be perfect for the board." "I'm assigned to it, sir," she said meekly, playing her part. He sneered. "Make it spotless or you're gone." "I'll check it myself." Executives trickled in, puzzled by the emergency call. James arrived last, nodding at Avery, a silent signal. She kept cleaning, waiting for the moment to strike. At 10 sharp, James opened the meeting. "We've lost our values," he said gravely. Todd cut in. "Get out, Emma, this is private." Avery set her mop down slow and steady. She pulled off her scarf, letting her curls fall, then unzipped her uniform to reveal a blazer underneath. "I'm Avery Jackson, your new CEO," she said, her voice clear and strong. The room froze. Jaws dropped as they recognized her. Years in meetings, and they'd never seen Emma as her. Shock turned to dread on Todd's face, Ryan's, Michelle's. They'd been caught, and she held the proof. Avery clicked a remote, and the screen lit up. Todd's water splashed over her, caught on camera. Ryan's voice mocked her work. Michelle's slap. Security stepped in as Avery finished. Todd begged, 30 years, James. "Don't throw me out." James stood beside her. "You wasted them hurting people," he said, his voice steady. "This isn't just about you. It's what you've done to us all." The board voted fast. Todd, Ryan, Lisa, Michelle, and Ethan were fired on the spot, escorted out with their badges yanked. Board members shook their heads, some scribbling notes, others staring in disbelief. Avery stood tall, her point made. This wasn't revenge. It was fairness restored, a promise kept to the workers her father had started as. The meeting wrapped up with plans to fix things, new rules, better treatment for all. Board members came to Avery one by one, some praising her guts, others sorry for what she'd faced. She stayed calm, nodding, her mind already on the work ahead. Alone with James in the empty boardroom, he hugged her tight. "You've done something big," he said, his voice thick with pride. "I thought this would teach you, but you've taught me. You're ready to lead." Her eyes stung with tears, not from the past pain, but from knowing she'd honored his dream. The fight had been worth it. 3 months later, James retired, passing the reins to Avery. She kept that gray Emma uniform folded in her office, a reminder of the bottom she'd seen. Jackson Tech changed under her. Workers got respect, not just orders. Surveys showed they were happier, and the company's numbers climbed. Turnover dropped, especially for those once ignored. Avery made sure everyone had a voice, from cleaners to directors. She'd learned what broken looked like and fixed it with fairness, just as James had wanted. The company wasn't perfect yet, but it was closer to the dream he'd built in that garage years ago. Avery changed too, stronger in body from the work, wiser in heart from the hurt. She'd felt invisible and turned it into understanding. In meetings, she noticed who got cut off and made space for them. On floor visits, she greeted cleaners by name, same as executives. Every choice she made came from seeing the company whole, top to bottom. Leading wasn't about power, it was about doing right by everyone who kept Jackson Tech running. She'd carry that lesson always, a promise to her father and to herself. The uniform stayed close, a quiet vow to never forget where real strength came from.